Welcome to the Irish NFL Show and welcome to our Week 12 Talking Points brought to you by Buskers on the Ball in Dublin's Temple Bar. Well, Week 12 featured a full slate of games, including the 3 Thanksgiving games and the Black Friday game between the Dolphins and the Jets. The Steelers put up over 400 yards of offense for the first time in 58 games and their first outing post the firing of offensive coordinator Matt Canada. The Packers ruined the Lions' Thanksgiving dinner. The Bills pushed the Eagles to the limit, but ended up with their own playoff hopes now very much on the brink. And the Giants beat the Patriots again. Now, before we get to our talking points, of course, we have this little matter of one leftover game from the weekend. No pun intended, given that there might be turkey left over indeed from Thanksgiving. But the Bears take on the Vikings. They travel to Minnesota for the second of those 2 games in the division there. And that's the Monday night game for your delectation. Justin Jefferson now, it turns out, won't be playing in that game. And we wonder when we'll actually see Jefferson again this season at this stage. He's obviously keeping that injury and making sure it's 100% right in a contract year before he ventures onto the pitch once more. Bears, I had them picked to win this evening, Brian, but that's not the way the bookies see it.
No, obviously we have new partners in Quinbet who've come on the show of late for the season. New partners of the show. We're delighted to have them involved. Yeah, checking out the odds on their website this evening. I suppose it is reflective, Connor, of the fact that Jefferson has been declared out. The Vikings are 3-point favourites, -3 on, and then the money lines in around 8 to 13 thereabouts with Quinbet. But they have various different specials on their website for the game, and obviously the match odds and player propositions such as touchdown scores. So whatever your fancy is, whatever you like to delve into in terms of when you're having a bet on the NFL, you can get that with Quinbet 18 plus to gamble responsibly. For the game itself, I think me and Colin are in lockstep. We've gone with the Vikings. You obviously have declared your love for the Bears in this game. We put that out obviously on our Twitter page earlier on. That was your selection for this game. But yeah, it's interesting to have us back doing Monday night show because when we were doing Monday night games, we always had to kind of caveat away from what we saw on Sunday just to remind ourselves there was one game left. So it is an enticing game tonight, but plenty to get through over the course of the next hour in terms of what we saw yesterday.
No, indeed, and we're mixing it up, of course, for anyone joining us live on YouTube, and you're very welcome, as always. We're like a Brian Flores defense at the moment. We're coming at you from all angles. You never know where you'll see us next, and sure, doesn't that keep everybody on their toes? Isn't that nice as we enter the festive season? Well, we start with a big talking point column from earlier on today. Not entirely surprising, but Frank Reich is out the door as coach of the Carolina Panthers. David Tepper pulled the trigger. Writing was very much on the locker room wall over the weekend. Reports coming out after their loss immediately of David Tepper going to the locker room. He was heard muttering, and not exactly under his breath, expletives, shaking his head, shouting, not in a good mood. And the fallout from all of that is that Frank Reich is on his bike.
Yeah, billionaires get what billionaires want, once again. But this is, I suppose, something that I saw that kind of came up again. It was Jerry Fowler tweeted. It was actually a piece that came out, and it was about Tepper, and it talked about how he approaches things and how he was so used to success in business, and they were trying to explain to him that like picks don't always work out, for agency acquisitions don't always work out, and apparently Tepper couldn't understand this. And the quote from inside the building at that time was, he expects football guys to be 100% right, like they are evaluating a balance sheet. And he can't understand that sometimes they get things wrong. Well, if that is David Tepper's approach, and if he has not learned or he is unwilling to bend from that, good luck to the next person who takes the job. But they will have to deal with the embarrassment that will come from the awkwardness at the podium, but ultimately they will be it'll be a handsome payoff, because the thing that gets forgotten sometimes is the coaching contracts are fully guaranteed. This is why players push for it, and Frank Reich will have 27 million over the next 3 years to enjoy, and kudos to him. David Tepper, and it seems to be coming out more and more now, is David Tepper made the pick. and David Tepper pushed for Bryce Young, and David Tepper is the one who ensured that it happened. Somebody will go in there, Connor, ultimately, because ego means that somebody will be willing to take a chance. The money means somebody will be willing to take a chance. But if David Tepper is going to micromanage in this manner, it is very difficult to see somebody having success.
Yeah, and I noticed Greg Rosenthal from the NFL pointing out on Twitter earlier on that this is actually the fourth head coach that David Tepper has fired in the last 18 months, if you count the two head coaches of his MLS franchise. So it doesn't matter what form of football you're playing, you do not make mistakes if you play for David Tepper, or you pay the price very quickly. Brian, if you're making the case in support of Tepper's decision here, you could say Panthers are 1-10. They're pretty much among the worst, if not the worst, in every statistical category. The QB hasn't worked out as envisaged. And Frank Reich and Josh McCown, who's also out the door, of course, haven't managed to develop Bryce Young in the way that David Tepper would have planned for. On the other side of that, Frank Reich will say, well, I started out this season without the three best offensive players from last season. You shipped Christian McCaffrey to the 49ers. You shipped DJ Moore to the Bears, my best wide receiver that otherwise Bryce Young would have been able to throw passes to. And you shipped my second best running back, Deontay Foreman, out the door. The three top offensive performances last year. What do you expect? The offensive line has been porous. Bryce Young's running for his life. What was actually a good result from this season? Maybe you didn't expect to be 1-10, but I mean, would it have saved his job if they'd been 3-8?
I don't think it would have, because of the nature of, as Colin alluded to, in terms of the impetuous nature in which this owner has. He doesn't seem to really fully understand what he wants from owning a franchise in the NFL. He maybe needs to take stock of how other various different owners in the league have turned themselves around in many ways. There's various different owners out there that kind of had a kind of similar type of kind of impetuous nature and the way they went about things early on in their ownership of teams, but they quickly kind of adapted to the world of the NFL. And I don't think he has adapted to the world of NFL just yet. He seems to always looking to be the man ultimately making decisions, no matter whether it's the playing side of things. I just want to touch on Frank Reich. Like I said on our group today, is that the end for Frank Reich now? Is he necessarily like going back to being an offensive coordinator at best, and Colin obviously to the financial compensation that comes with it? But like these guys, as you said, and it'll be the next coach, has a reputation to behold, and where does that leave him? Because he's looked like a fallen man since the Carson Wentz experiment didn't work out in Indianapolis. I mean, he went out on a limb to get Carson Wentz to come to Indianapolis in terms of vouching for him. How was he having that relationship in Philly? That didn't transpire very well. Initially, it looked a great move. They had a good start to the season, and since then, struggled last year. I mean, he was sacked in season by the Colts, and now he's been sacked for whatever word terminology you want to use, but essentially relieved of his duties in two roles now. To me, that's. But maybe he knew ultimately what was going to come of it, but he made the decision. It was interesting nugget I read on a podcast today, which is he had moved down to Carolina, with the expectation he was finished in the game, and this opportunity came along, and it made logistical sense for him to take because he was already in the area, but he didn't do a lot of scouting and homework in terms of how he's going to approach the role, and he didn't present anything different to the owner, and yet the owner took him on. I imagine the owner now will look to get one of the younger generational head coaches, or the up-and-coming, potentially the Lions offense coordinator, or someone of that manner. But again, careful what you wish for, because it was only a couple of years ago that Byron Leftwich was a highly sought-after guy to be the Jags head coach. He didn't take it because of the relationship with the GM, and he's been relieved of his duties as an offensive coordinator. Things turn around very quickly in this league, so careful what you wish for in many ways.
And Colin, as we were saying, that very much might be a difficult thing to come back from for Frank Reich. He's been fired in 2 consecutive seasons now. He didn't even last as many games as Urban Meyer in his first season with a number 1 pick, which I don't think is fair to Frank Reich, to be perfectly honest, and to what he's achieved in the game. But it's probably not been helped, I think, by the fact that CJ Stroud proves an instant success in Houston. D'Amico Ryans and his coaching team prove an instant success in Houston. And clearly David Tepper is looking at that going, this is what I was supposed to get. Now, the situations couldn't be more different in so many different respects, because the Texans obviously had that bountiful haul from the Deshaun Watson trade. They fell into the right quarterback. They have been able to put the right weapons around them. They hit on a couple of draft picks, and away they go.
Yeah, and I mean the piece, like Stroud has Tank Dell, who has been an absolute revelation, and Bryce Young has not had that. But I don't know if it, and it might be, the end for Frank Reich. He might want it to be, but I think the fact that he has been, I suppose, let's say, two interesting owners, okay, and Jim Irsay continues to make life interesting for everybody up there in Indianapolis. I think that will hold sway, right? Because if you are a normal owner, in so much as any billionaire is normal, and you look at that, and you're going to think, if that guy managed to deal with those personalities, maybe he can come in and do a job. And yeah, it probably has to be a bit like the Dan Quinn scenario, where he's going to have to go back to being a coordinator if he wants to another shot at a head coach, and maybe he does or maybe he doesn't. But he dealt with incredibly difficult situations. We all know now, that Bryce Young was not his pick. So there are lots of things to look at and to say, okay, if you gave Frank Reich a clean slate, he made a mistake on Carson Wentz, fine, but he has done an okay job with others. And once you get on to the coaching carousel, unless you make a real Hames of things, it's difficult to fall off of it.
Yeah, this is true, I guess, and this is the beauty and the curse of being a head coach in the NFL. Ultimately, that you got to deal with these personalities. I mean, you could see, even I was looking back at some of his more recent interviews, and you could see, as somebody said, Frank Reich visibly aged as the season went on, and he made these kind of pointed comments about the weekly meetings with the owner and how they weren't pleasant. But he was saying it was making me a better person through some kind of gritted teeth. But as you say, he's getting paid, and even if it is retirement, it should be a very comfortable retirement indeed. So we won't break out the overly sized violins just yet. But if we're talking about organizations that are run properly, Philadelphia is a pretty good place to start. And that game against the Bills over the weekend. So Bills going into Lincoln Field, Brian, and I talked about it on the podcast last week, making the case for the Bills to go in and make a statement. But I said ultimately, I still pick Philadelphia to win. And unfortunately, from a Bills perspective, that's the way it transpired. We saw kind of in microcosm everything the Bills have been about over the last couple of seasons. Josh Allen strapping the team on his back, doing heroic things, putting his body on the line, some clutch plays, some clutch catches, one kind of bad interception that I'm sure he'd like to have back. Little bit of bad luck in terms of refereeing call, although to be fair, they did get a very good one, and a terrible call, though it was in their favor on a roughing the passer call in overtime, but they couldn't cash in, and the Eagles triumphed. The Eagles find a way to win again. But where does that leave the Bills now and their playoff hopes? 3 of their next 5 games are against the Chiefs, the Cowboys, and the Dolphins, and that's not a run-in that anyone wants to see when you're struggling for a wildcard spot.
It's funny, as I watched the game, it literally transpired in a roundabout way in terms of how you preview this game, Connor. Essentially, you went quarter for quarter for 50 minutes, essentially, of this is what the Bills need to do to win, and this is what the Bills. But yeah, I'm going to select the Eagles anyway, and that's in a roundabout way kind of how the game played out. You'd over 400 yards of thrown yards. He had 81 yards rushing. He, like you said, he put the team on his back. He just more than put the team on the back, bearing in mind the adverse weather conditions. But Eagles, the first half, it was quite a low scoring game. It was I wouldn't say it was a dull affair, but it was neither team seemed to be doing their utmost. And then the second half, the game exploded. And then just looking at the Bills in the second half, missed field goal, 2 touchdowns, interception, punt. But in the second half, despite the scores, there was opportunities there to put this game away, and just didn't do it. And again, you leave the Eagles hanging around, despite shall we say, they're playing within themselves. They're holding their own. I was looking at a very interesting stat today. We're talking about Kyle Shanahan and going into 4th quarter, and he hasn't, victory on any games where he's 8 plus points down. Well, where the Eagles have been down by 10 points on the Sirianni, he's got a 61% win rate. He just finds ways to get this team to come back. They never give it in, and they get to overtime. I know Colin probably have a couple of thoughts on that 20 seconds at the end as to why the Bills didn't even, look to go aggressive and maybe try to get into field goal range. Because essentially, when it came into overtime, I think we all knew whoever got the ball and ultimately scored a touchdown was going to win the game. That's how it played out. And even on the last drive in which the Eagles won the game on, they went so soft defensively. I mean, this team, it's supposed to be Sean McDermott has them up there as a great defensive minded team. There was nothing from them yesterday. I mean, they allowed the Eagles, with exception maybe the first quarter, to go up and down the field on them as much as they like. I think it was the second half. It was punt, touchdown, field goal, and then touchdown in overtime. And this Bills defense is supposed to be arguably, according to Sean McDermott, one of the top 10 in the league. I'm not saying it, and ultimately that's why they're in this difficult situation now.
Colin, one of the things we mentioned very early on in the season, if not in the preseason, was Von Miller and how you'd want Von Miller down the stretch. Man, he looked a shell of himself yesterday. And to Colin's point, they just couldn't get the big defensive plays when they really needed it. And ultimately, it ends up again in disappointment. Again, they fall short in one of these games, just like they did in the 13-second game, the infamous overtime game against the Chiefs, to change the rules for how the NFL runs overtime in the playoffs to avoid a repeat. The Bills actually were given the opportunity, given the ball, and to Colin's point, they just couldn't punch it home, and that they ultimately only have themselves to blame. They had the opportunities to win this game. Now, having said all that, if this is the baseline for the Bills for the rest of the season, I still give them a puncher's chance of making the postseason.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking to Seth Wickersham for a podcast, or Seth Walder for a podcast that'll come out later in the week, and he's obviously ESPN's kind of stats and analytics guy, and ESPN had just run the numbers on this before we were talking, and the Bills' playoff chances, by their reckoning, sit at 21%. I think the Bills, I think Josh Allen is a great QB. I think he's actually playing at a high level. I think there are problems on defense. Sure, they're getting older and the injuries. But Brian will know I was apoplectic at the end of this game, and I quite liked the Eagles. I thought this was trying to ice the kicker. I mean, this what are we playing football from the Stone Age, which it kind of felt like at times. I thought that was crazy. I know plenty of people won't agree with that, but to me it was just silly, right? You needed those timeouts, especially I thought if you were going to go down the field. This is a guy who was on the other side of 13 seconds. This is a guy who saw Mac Jones go down the field in seconds to win the game for the Patriots, and yet you're that innately conservative. You don't have a guy with a bad arm. This is not like you've got 20 seconds and you've got Drew Brees at the very end of his career, or you got Peyton Manning at the end of his, and it's like, I don't think we can chuck this ball more than 10 yards. You've got Josh Allen. You've got the guy with perhaps the biggest cannon in the entire league. Like, he has done this time and time again. It was so cowardly. And to me, it was the antithesis of what you see in Nick Sirianni, right? Because I make this point, and I was talking to Simon about this yesterday. Sirianni is the perfect coach for in terms of his fit for that city. He is everything Philadelphia want. He is chippy. He is aggressive. He's in your face. He makes life difficult. He doesn't care what you think of him. It's perfect. He's exactly what Philly is. Whereas Sean McDermott does not have any of the chaos. Like, Josh Allen is perfect for Buffalo because he embodies that chaos that the Buffalo fans have, the jumping off tables, the disregard for his own body. Sean McDermott doesn't have that. He is innately conservative. And it's funny because Walter said if he gets there, he feels that they could be in with a real chance of winning a Super Bowl because they have like the ability to win 3 or 4 games. But I don't know, under Sean McDermott, with that level of innate conservatism, how can you be on the opposite end of 13 seconds? You watch the Chiefs do that to you, and you don't think, even though your QB went toe to toe with Mahomes, one of the great, truly great NFL games we've seen, and you shy away from it?
Yeah. I gotta say, that is one of the best postseason performances I've ever seen. Certainly in losing effort, as you say. Like, when you see Josh Allen in what people call God mode with the Infinity Gauntlet on, he can absolutely bend the game to his will in a way that probably nobody can, because he can beat you in so many different ways. He can go over you, he can go past you, he can go through you if he needs to, and tuck the ball under his arm. And to see him do that yesterday and end up on the losing side, it is kind of heartbreaking, because he's just so exciting to watch. He's everything that the game should be when it's played at its best. But like, let's leave it there for the first segment, and start our second segment by talking, Brian, about the team that actually won that game. Colin has been touching on Philadelphia there, but somebody made the comment over the weekend, I can't remember who, that Philadelphia are essentially the rich man's Steelers. That they're winning games in equally unsustainable ways. Like, for all that we talked about Buffalo having opportunities to win, Buffalo being overly conservative, Sean McDermott not going for it and not backing his quarterback to win it in overtime in particular, a decision that stands out. However, you're relying on your kicker, who admittedly is a great kicker, to nail a 59-yard field goal in the driving rain and a swirling wind in November to get you to overtime against the Bills. You're outgained by over 100 yards. We've talked about how you punch the Eagles and they punch back harder, and they remind you of great teams across many sports where they've got so much talent that somebody will find a way to make a play and somebody will win, but it's making you nervous looking at them, which sounds a bizarre thing to say about a team that's 10-1, but they surely can't keep doing this. That, as the level of competition intensifies, there are teams out there that are as good as or better than the Buffalo Bills that the Eagles are going to have to get past. You want to show something a little bit more in the way of sustainable and replaceable performance if you're going to keep winning.
Well, I think this weekend is the one, isn't it? Kind of like they're playing at home to the 49ers. I think if we're ever going to have a measuring stick game, it's bizarre that we're even suggesting there's a measuring stick game for this Eagles team, but this is the one this weekend, because even right now, if you look at QuinnBet in terms of the odds the weekend, the Eagles aren't favourites for this game. 49ers 2-point favourites to win and beat this Eagles team. And I can understand in many ways why it is, because we're seeing what the 49ers have been doing. They did it last Thursday. Hurts only threw for 200 yards last night. But yeah, as you said, they're just tipping. Like, we always refer to the Chiefs as this. And Colin did it a number of times recently where, the Chiefs will come alive in December and into the playoffs. But should we not be looking at that from an NFC perspective? This is an Eagles team that are in a similar situation, because last Monday, I would have thought it would look quite a daunting week for them in terms of they're going to play on the road in Kansas City, and then they're going to come home and play against the Bills before they even come up against this 49ers team. Yeah, you could argue they're not doing enough right now offensively. I mean, there were some plays yesterday which the Bills will look at, even that particular touchdown, which I felt was people were raving about the Hurts and the great play. I felt it was a bit of a lob up. He threw it up there essentially. Now, in fairness, he threw it up in a position where it was at the back of the end zone.
The Zacchaeus one.
Yes, touchdown. Yeah. I felt that was a bit of I wouldn't necessarily call it a Hail Mary type of throw, but it was quite. The precision was very good. He knew that if he was put in a position where if it's not caught by my player, it's not going to be caught by anybody. So the credit's there, but he was lauded for that particular play after. I felt it was very much.
Also reminded me of that primary school song, Zacchaeus was a greedy little man. He certainly got fed there.
Well, the greedy man came out on top because there was two Bills players in the vicinity and they couldn't find a way to navigate the ball out of the end zone. But look, I suppose we're the pressing point here is they're not playing well. By and large, they're winning. It's the robustness and the strength that they've created, and they never give in. And that upper level, of quality that they have, even players that can make big plays at the right time, such as your AJ Browns and your Smiths, getting the touchdowns, the key moments in the game, along with a bit of help, let's be fair, from some of the refereeing decisions in the game. Like, I think we're going to come to referees tonight, so maybe we'll hold fire for now. But there was some really dubious ones in that game. But like this weekend for me is it's a fantastic game. Sunday night, ideal time for all of us. 9:30. It's very much. Hopefully, it's the NFC Championship game, which we didn't get last January because of the nature of Brock Purdy's injury at the time.
And Colin, this really is the gauntlet for Philadelphia. We talked about the Buffalo Bills down the stretch. Now, there's no way that Philly is not going to make the postseason, obviously. But these two games now, you got San Francisco and you got Dallas back to back. And sorry, before we go further, as I mentioned, Dallas, as Fred reminds us this evening in the comments, Deron Bland set a record over the weekend. That's his 5th pick six, which is an incredible single season record. 5 interceptions for most defenders is a great result in any given season. 5 pick sixes in a season, we've literally never seen it before. And he and the rest of that Dallas defense are playing at a really high level, which sets these two matches, never mind San Francisco this weekend, but the Cowboys the following week. These are mouth-watering ties.
Yeah, but I suppose To me, Connor, there should be a lot more pressure. Like, people are on about the Eagles as if the Eagles have something to prove. The Eagles went to the Super Bowl. The Cowboys. I mean,
The fact that they
we
didn't
are
win it
not
means
that.
they do have something to prove, even to themselves.
Well, yeah, but the Cowboys got their absolutely spanked by the 49ers. Like, they got embarrassed on prime time, and it's like that game never happened. Like, Cowboys fans, but once again, burned the third Dak jerseys that they owned. Like, how many times has Skip performatively burned his Cowboys jersey at this point? How many times has Dak been dismissed? And now we're talking, about Shannon Sharp is picking Dak over Josh Allen. So it's hilarious to me how, I suppose, the narrative goes in terms of the NFL. So yes, the Eagles have a very tough schedule. I mean, the home to the 49ers, then they are on the road to the Cowboys, and then they're on the road to the Eagles. So presumably, I don't know whether they're going to stay, kind of, or fly back to Philly to go back over, because those are two significantly long road games. And yeah, they're not playing well, but like, at times they have kind of missed everybody this year, and Jason Kelce didn't play, like, and yet they have found a way. So
And you hit on
I
something
think,
there, Colin, that
look,
they're sorry, but they're sneaky banged up here. Like, they lost Fletcher Cox in that game. Lane Johnson didn't suit up to start. Jalen Hurts is clearly carrying a knock. They're talking about a bruised knee, but he limped off the pitch at one stage and did what Jalen Hurts did, and came back on and gutted it out. I wince every time they do the brotherly shove with Hurts. You're thinking that's a lot of pressure on that knee, but they just keep coming.
yeah, they and just on that, like, ultimately this might not end in success. Chances are it probably doesn't. There'll be one Super Bowl winner. But if we give other teams a pass at times when they're missing, right? The 49ers lost 3 on the bounce, and it was, they were missing Debo and they were missing Trent. And like, Lane Johnson is out, Fletcher Cox is out. They've missed plenty of players over the course of the season, and yet they keep doing it. And as starters go, I've said it before, 49ers best team in the league for me. But it will be a very interesting game, I think, at the weekend. And just on the Cowboys, I think it's huge for them. I think they are playing incredibly well. I think the defense has been absolutely lights out. But it's a big test for the Cowboys now as well. They get the opportunity to welcome the Eagles into Jerry's world, and in prime time, which the Cowboys are well used to playing at, to I suppose put a marker down. And I would say that I don't think the Eagles are going to shy away from throwing the ball. So he may get the opportunity to add to that pick 6 total.
And if the Cowboys beat them, the 49ers will say, of course, we softened it up. It's like when somebody else opens the jam jar after you've done all the work on it. Brian, one final point on the Eagles before we go to the Giants.
Well, actually, I wanted to jump in on the Cowboys, because the difference for me this year with the Cowboys is, and it was happening last year, but it really is happening this year, they are beating up on really bad teams. Not when I say bad teams, average teams. Like, where even the better teams are struggling to get over the line against certain teams. I know NFL, and you take it on its merits every week. Every game is different. We see one team one week, they're fantastic. The next week, they struggle. And we ask the question, why, after playing so well the previous week? But consistently throughout the course of this season, the Cowboys have turned over in a manner in which is really, comprehensive and impressive, and defensively in particular. I mean, 45-10 on Thursday, and they didn't really get out of second gear. And there's been other games, but like, that's good. But sometimes you do need those competitive, hard battle victories, because that kind of sets you up nicely for these big games against essentially the stronger teams to come. And if you look at the Cowboys' schedule, I mean, Seattle on Thursday is a tough game in itself. You got the Eagles, you got the Bills, Dolphins. Like, the Lions are no turnover these days. Like, they've got some really tough games ahead. So it'd be interesting to see what they're like come late December and how they come out of these games.
These are tough battles, Brian, but the supreme battle, of course, is directed inwards against the self, as the more philosophical among us will know. And that's indeed the case in New York, where it seems that Brian Daboll and Wink Martindale are at each other's throats, if you believe some reports. But Daboll's entertaining press conference after that victory against the Patriots suggested otherwise. He said, the only thing myself and Wink argue over is the last slice of pizza. Where does the truth lie in this one?
I think somewhere in the middle, and someone else tried to double down on that question around the argument, and he alluded to a bigger pizza may need to be ordered in the future. He also then made a very vocal piece in the dressing room.
Surely Tommy DeVito's family must own a pizza restaurant, or am I trading in debased stereotypes here? He's really embracing the passing by Zon thing, by the way.
He's loving it, and so is the family. I mean, the family before the game were out. I don't know if you saw the footage of them outside in the parking lot, and they're all there with cigars and really enjoying it. I mean, it's a whirlwind for him right now. He has signed a 3-year contract, as it happens. It was announced today that there was a 3-year contract signed in the off-season once they took him on the active roster, and it's a great story. But I would say, and I joked about it today, but some of his numbers over the course of the last 2 weeks have been quite impressive. But what stands out for me is how the team are rallying around. I mean, there was one particular play yesterday where he was put to the ground, and the offensive line all ran over and scrambled to pick him up, every single one of them. I don't recall even Daniel Jones getting that love and affection. We saw it in London with Josh Allen. He went down all the Bills' offensive line. And it's kind of a far cry from where Mac Jones is, because if you look, it's like polar opposites yesterday. Mac Jones was continuously giving out to his own players around not being in the right position and misunderstanding the call. And he's on the sideline and he's ranting and raving, sitting there on his own. He looks a very lonesome soul. Where on the opposite side, you've got a guy who's, over the course of the last 3 weeks, has won 2 games for the Giants. Looks like he's going to have the opportunity to remain as quarterback when they come off the bye and play against the Packers. And okay, the Packers had a good win Thursday, but it wouldn't be against the realms of possibility the way the Giants defense played over the course of the last 2 weeks, with nine turnovers in 2 games, that they could do a number on the Packers. But look, inevitably, I don't think it's going to end with him having a future in terms of being the quarterback for the Giants. But it is a nice story right now when there's very little to shout about over the course of the season.
Little glimmer of hope now, and we don't know whether it's going to turn out to be the latest version of Linsanity or not. But got a connection with Jalen Hyatt there. A couple of really nice throws. He looks exciting. That's somebody that Giants fans have got to be excited about seeing. He's starting to look like the player that you hoped he was when he was drafted.
Giants fans have been frustrated throughout the course of the season, and it's because of the nature of the league in which you see so many players. Look at Puka in with the Rams, 5th round pick. We saw Prosecco, I know it's running back last year, 6th round pick. There's players that come into the league and they hit the ground running immediately, and the coaches throw them in. Hank Dell, and Josh Downs with 3rd round pick with the Colts. The Giants have obviously this nature of trying to ease these wide receivers in, and at a very early stage of the season, start of week 2, with the connection between Daniel Jones and Jalen Hyatt, where he went off for 90 yards. And the Giants fans are asking the question, how are these other teams getting their most explosive weapons into the game plan, and the Giants aren't? But yesterday, obviously, there was some really good throws and really going to go connection with him, and he went for over 100 yards. Jalen Hyatt's numbers this year, in fairness, are up there with a lot of the rookie wide receivers. And basically, it makes you wonder what could be if you had a really proper productive team there, but unfortunately that's not the case right now. But yeah, he looks like a bright spot, 3rd round pick. Fair enough, people felt would go 4th round, late 4th team to the 2nd. He fell to the 3rd. I think he's got a lot of promise and a really good player for the future.
Colin, they say all political careers end in failure, such is the cliche, and you might say the same about NFL head coaching careers. Ultimately, a lot of them end up in ignominy as the long-tenured head coach stays for one season too long. Is that the case now for Belichick in New England? Do you think it's the second back-to-back losing seasons for the first time in his head coaching career in New England? That was a tough one to take on so many levels. You expect to see Belichick putting the rookie quarterback in the blender. Instead, he's putting his own quarterbacks in the blender.
Yeah, and nothing seems to be going right for the Patriots. I mean, some people, very few, would have you believe that he is playing 4D chess and that they're actually doing a sneaky tank and they are looking to get the number 1 overall pick. I just don't believe that. Not given Bill's age, not given Robert Kraft's age. I just think it's the game seems to have passed him by, and it feels, Connor, a bit like, and if we can get, the end of Arsene Wenger's tenure with Arsenal. Obviously, Belichick had infinitely more success. He had Alex Ferguson like success, but the game just seems to have gone by him, and that is a problem. I mean, everything. It also stems from the fact that he has all the control. So Bill is the head coach, and Bill is also the GM, and think about the Bill O'Brien piece this year. He brought Bill O'Brien back. He didn't look for somebody new. He didn't look to bring new ideas into the building. He just brought back the same people and the same coaching stable, and they don't look to do anything new. And this is a league where, things have, it feels like, kind of accelerated somewhat, both offensively and defensively. And while Mac Jones was probably never the answer, what the Patriots have done to him will be a case study for how not to handle a first round QB in the future. Because again, in the lead up to the game, Belichick, kind of wouldn't name the starting QB. We all knew that if Mac Jones made some mistakes, he was going to get yanked. And yeah, he was bad. But again, when somebody, imagine being at work, right, and your boss was standing over you, watching you type, and you're under that sort of pressure, it's insane. Like, nobody can perform under that when you don't feel like there's any belief there, where you know that you're immediately going to get hauled out. And
for $3.9 million a year, Colin, my boss can sit on my lap while I type.
Well, I suppose I don't know if maybe Bill Belichick will play Santa at the Patriots Christmas party, and Mac Jones can sit in his lap and he can whisper into Bill's ear what he wants for Christmas.
Brian, it's notable that we've seen the Patriots fail at so many different levels, but special teams used to be a particular strength, and there was a kind of, I suppose, a bit of poetic justice if you're not a Patriots fan, but a sad irony in them being damned with a missed straightforward field goal at the end of that game, which should have sent it to overtime. It's a 35-yard shot. We talked about the Eagles hitting a 59-yard shot in the rain in Lincoln Fields to send them to overtime. That was a grisly end to that game for them.
It kind of sums up the Patriots season, doesn't it? It's like a few false storms, or it looked like the game was going to go into overtime. It was a very, very doable kick. There's been a number of very easy-looking kicks in MetLife this season that have gone the wrong side of the post. So maybe we shouldn't beat up too much on the kicker. But he's had a few misses over the course of the last few weeks. He hasn't looked comfortable. He hasn't certainly been playing at the level in which the Patriots and Bill Belichick would expect. So it didn't come as a surprise to me when he went out and missed it. A lot of Patriots fans. Yeah. So a lot of Patriots fans think there was a bit of hokey pokey going on there in terms of, they'll gladly, I suppose this is again the narrative that keeps being built every week around them trying to tank without necessarily tanking, that they were going to relieve that he missed the kick. But it certainly didn't look like Belichick's face, to me, didn't look like certainly a coach that wanted them to miss the kick. And
put it wide
summed up a bad day for them.
Next year.
Yeah. They scored in the opening drive of the second half and since didn't do anything else for the remainder of the game. And if it wasn't for some good tackling and players not giving up in play, he could have easily had another pick six for Mac Jones, because Bobby Okereke looked like he was off to the houses until he was pulled down at the 18-yard line. There's a lot of work for this Patriots team, even if they get the quarterback right, as we've seen with certain teams, over the course of the last few years.
Probably the best thing Mac Jones did in the game was tackle Bobby Okereke.
Yeah, well, I wish he hadn't, because I had a few quid with Quimby on the Giants defense to score in the game, so I was shouting and screaming, but unfortunately not to be. It wasn't. I think the expectation of the game very much played out as if. And he thought, I know you went for the Patriots, me and Colin felt the Giants would get over it. It was never going to be an attractive game. It could have, but I think there's more problems in New England than there isn't at the Giants right now.
Yeah, I was joking that it might end up a 2-2 draw. It was looking like heading for 0-0 at half time. I was thinking that the horrific vista might actually come true. That's the end of our second segment. Colin, we start our third segment by looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Matt Canada, Matt who, we joked about an offensive explosion, didn't quite materialize, but the Steelers offense did pile up over 400 yards for the first time in 58 games. Didn't necessarily translate into points as they only put 16 on the board, but that was enough to down the Joe Burrow-less Bengals. The Steelers are now 7-4. They're still winning games, regardless of the relative offensive dysfunction. Did it look any better to you? Did it pass the eye test?
It looked better, and I think it's hilarious that the Steelers went over 400 yards in the game, the last game before Matt Canada was hired, and then as soon as he walks out the door, they go over 400 again. So there's an awful lot said that fans don't know as
just
much.
To put that in context, Colin, and like it is psychologically important because literally every other team in the NFL has done it at least twice over that span, no matter how poor they've been. It's remarkable that the Steelers, who've had a winning record for that entire time, haven't managed to do it.
Yeah, no, it was almost a performance piece, you would have to say. But I suppose what I'm thinking is, it's always said, oh, fans don't know as much as GMs know, or as head coaches do. Well, sometimes they do. Sometimes everybody was able to point to Matt Canada being one of the issues and the main issue on the Steelers offense. And when you kind of consider, how good that defense is, now the Bengals made some interesting decisions. They decided, not to block TJ Watt at times. And
I wouldn't block him either if I was up against him. He's big and scary.
We'll see, if they make the playoffs. But you would have to say the next couple of games are home to the Cardinals and home to the Patriots. Not murderous row, and then you got to go on the road to the Colts. So like the last three, the last two in particular, you got to go to Seattle, and Seattle will be probably fighting for their lives to get the 7th, and then you got to go into Baltimore. But again, we know the rivalry there, so the Steelers are well set up here. But I do think that this has to be something of like they have to see more from Kenny Pickett, right? And because it's the Steelers, they'll always give people time, but they've got to see more from Kenny Pickett.
I tell you who they also have to see more from, Brian, is Deontay Johnson. Like, he went viral over the weekend for what was an absolutely disgraceful package of play. Like, talk about zero effort. Chase Claypool levels of indifference. Even Chase Claypool might have tried a leg a little bit harder. It's a remarkable clip for people who haven't seen it of him. Firstly, failing to block on the play. Secondly, when the ball is fumbled, just kind of turning his back and waltzing around, not even trying to get a hat on the guy or chase the play or do his job. And this is not what you expect in the Steelers organization at any level, and certainly not something you can imagine Mike Tomlin looking on kindly.
Yeah, you'd have to wonder, despite the record in which they're at, and it is a surprising record for me because I never thought that for a million years they'd be in this position. And Colin goes out to schedule and he's light in terms of the next two games, and I think they could even potentially even lose those last few and squeak in. But where's this group as a team? Because last year we were talking about Mike Tomlin, not recognizing that things weren't right there, and they finished the season reasonably strong. People thought they'd really push on this year because Pickens has a better game yesterday. There was some really nice plays to Pickens yesterday, and he's getting up and he's firing the arrows of the first down. He looks really energized. He looks like, oh, look, I am the player in which I know I am, and now I'm getting the ball. Maybe it's because he believes Matt Canada's out the door. And 3 weeks ago on a Thursday night game against the Titans, it was kind of roles reversed because Deontay Johnson was the one getting all the action that evening. He scored a touchdown. And Pickens on that particular evening was kind of doing exactly what Deontay Johnson was doing yesterday. It's like as if they're not all in sync with one another. They're not all in unison with one another.
And we know Minkah Fitzpatrick and Johnson went at one another last week as well.
Yeah, so fine, they're in a winnable position to go to playoffs, but like it doesn't strike me as a team that are very much joined at the hip, and the wide receiver room would make for an interesting flying the ball kind of documentary if we could see what's been discussed in there, because bearing in mind the offense coordinator just moved off. They've moved off away from the offense coordinator. You would have thought that would have been a sudden burst for all the players to be re-energized and go out there. And he just looked so off yesterday and so disappointed with the play that was being, and the plays in particular that were being called. You're kind of thinking, what's the point in being out there? Because I'm sure there's a rookie player there that would love that opportunity to be out there and would give his all to. And for the game itself, I mean, it was a closer game really than it should have been. I mean, Jamar Chase yesterday has something like 82 yards, and I think 50 of them came off tips and bounce balls, and he's catching ball with his mouth guard not even in place and stuff. Some weird, strange plays that the Bengals kind of got fortunate on. The game probably shouldn't have been as close as it was, and there was a fumble obviously early on when it looked like the Steelers were about to score, and then there was one obviously dropped in the end zone. That was Deontay Johnson as well, where he dropped the ball, which looked like a touchdown. Strange. Like, that can't continue. These guys need to get their head together.
I'm just thinking while you're talking there, Brian. Never mind flying the wall. That has to be the next Netflix series. I'm going to pitch that wide out. Never mind focusing on the quarterbacks. Like, that'd be money. Season just about a whole series just about wide receivers. It would make the Real Housewives look less catty by comparison.
No more Steelers watch parties. Let's have them bring the training camp to Dublin, and we get the cameras out and record that for coverage. Put it on the Late Late Show or the Late Late Toy Show maybe if it gets really bad.
Colin, I'll tell you a locker room that is tight and where everybody's pulling in the same direction. The owners of the longest winning streak in the NFL, the Denver Broncos, extend that winning run to 5, beating the Browns. Talk about peaking at just the right time. It all seems to be finally coming together. You have little faith.
And like a good win yesterday. I mean, the Broncos are playing that. There's a lot of talk about complementary football. Well, this is it. And they've gotten lucky at times in that obviously they were playing the backup QB yesterday, but they've also played the Bills and played the Chiefs in this run.
That same Steelers team were playing the backup QB last week and they lost.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to give credit to Sean Payton and Vance Joseph. This is a team that looked absolutely dead and buried. This is a team that gave up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins, and yet on this current run, they haven't even given up 80 points yet. So it's a really impressive, and the way in which the defense has been able to get turnovers. Now, I have concerns about teams being able to run on the Broncos a little bit, but the fact they've been able to force the turnovers has meant that teams have had to pass the ball, and the Broncos have been able to pin the ears back and allow the guys to go, which has caused issues. Russell Wilson is playing really well, and I think one of the things that really stood out yesterday is he throwing the same number of moon balls that he did previously? No. But did we see Russ use his acumen and his knowledge and his experience at the line yesterday? He was spotting stuff. He was calling it the pizza call.
They ran essentially that same play 3 times in a row and got them every single time with it. It was extraordinary to watch. And as you say, the calls at the line, he's really feeling it at the moment.
Yeah, no, he is. I don't know if pizza was that he was having one for Dable and one for Wink so that they weren't having to share. Maybe that's what that was about. But no, Russ is, you'd have to say that in the red zone, Russ is playing exceptionally well. So basically the Broncos are playing really conservative until they get into the red zone, and then they're allowing Russ to be kind of as conservative as he wants. And ever since the QB collective kind of sent the mocking tweet, he is 3-0 against QB collective head coaches.
Brian, speaking of late pushes for a playoff place, the Broncos very much in the picture now. Both Green Bay and LA in the other conference in the NFC, just a game behind the 7th-seeded Seahawks. It's not inconceivable that one of these two teams is going to make the postseason after fairly inconspicuous starts, a poor start in Green Bay's case. It seems to be coming good for both of them. That was a win in a big spot for Green Bay on Thanksgiving. Everybody expected the Lions to finally get over their Thanksgiving Day hoodoo, but it wasn't to be. And the Packers really smacked them in the face.
I was just about to say, yeah, everybody has a plan until you get smacked in the face. I mean, it was so you could see the plan immediately. They felt they could get at the Lions secondary. I mean, they allowed Jordan Love to come out essentially. The first play of the game, he goes 62 yards to Watson, and they never got away from it. They just kept going after him throughout the game consistently. And then the fairness of the Packers defense, we spoke about time and time again in games over the course of the season where they haven't played offensively, played that well offensively, where they kept them in the games. But they came after Goff, and Goff was really off again. There was the turnovers, there was the fumble, which was returned for a touchdown in the Packers defense. They came to play. But I thought Jordan Love's numbers were hugely impressive over the course of the game. And even when it looked like, I think we always felt the Lions would come back into it. I didn't necessarily. I just felt it was one that was got out of reach early in terms of them coming back and winning it. But I always felt, in particular, the start of the second half when they went and got the touchdown. And yet again, they never got away from the game plan. Just kept going after them, really aggressive manner in terms of the offense. And yeah, the Packers will look at this, and we joked about it last week because we said Matt Snyman, who we've had on the show from the Athletic, had said last week that the Packers are only one game out of playoffs, and here they are, they've won again. I would be more keen on the Rams right now. I know they were going against the Cards yesterday, but it was the manner of the result and how they went about it, and see players like Higbee, who have been really solid for them over the course of the last 4 years, who's done very little in the last year. Forced to, he's activated off the injury reserve, comes in 2 touchdowns. And I watched Sean McVay's, I know they all do. I know everybody's aware that the cameras are in the locker room, but he's so galvanized and energized after the game in terms of recognizing how well these guys are playing for him and as a team and what's ahead in terms of the schedule. The Rams could really make a serious push here. And look, this is a team that started the season that we felt hadn't got a hope, and there they are now. We're one game out, and arguably, depending on tonight's result, if the Vikings were to lose, they'd be right back in the mix in terms of literally leapfrogging them into the playoff place. It just shows the manner in which the head coach, Sean McVay, is. He's a fantastic coach.
Colin, meanwhile, in the slow bicycle race, Atlanta now takes control, quote unquote, of the NFC South, if you can say that about a team with a 5-6 record. But they're 3-0 in the division now, which puts them in as commanding a position as you get in the NFC South. And shout out to Alex Smith over the weekend for throwing shade at Tom Brady. That has got to be one of the more entertaining exchanges of the past few days, where he took issue with Tom's comments about the mediocrity in the league, saying you were playing in the worst division in football, and also threw some shade at Rex Ryan beside him, talking about the AFC East back in the day, which was very, very funny. Again, one to check out if you haven't seen it already. But turns out, and we talk about Arthur Smith's constant and bewildering and irritating tinkering, but if you give the ball to Bijan, you can win, even with Desmond Ridder, it seems.
Well, just before that, it very much enjoyed Alex Smith's comments. The other, if people haven't seen it, are Barry Sanders. He pointed out that if Tom feels that the standard of the league isn't what it was when he was playing, it might be because Tom is watching his former teams and not because he's watching Barry's former team. So how about that? Barry Sanders retired more than 2 decades and still stealing souls. Kudos to you, Baz. In relation to this one, I suppose Arthur Smith's kind of performance art piece, where he wants to win in spite of the QB, got another victory. You just wonder if they had a real QB, what could this Falcons team be? For the Saints, ultimately, it was the red zone issues, and Brian and I disagree. Derek Carr isn't it. He's not it. What did you bring him in for? What are you paying him all that money for? Ultimately, you could just be playing Jameis and having an awful lot more fun with it. I don't know where it's going for the Saints, but it is. I saw Mina Kimes had a piece earlier. I think it was the Atlantic that had a piece over the weekend, which had the title "Not Everything Has to Be Meaningful," and she put a picture of that and said the AFC or the NFC South, which is kind of fitting every year, Connor, there is a division that nobody wants to win, and that somebody kind of ends up winning by default. And it looks like that the Falcons will trip themselves up the least in the quest to win this one.
Brian is maintaining a dignified visage there as Derek Carr is defamed on the program. Someone has to come out of this godforsaken division, Brian, and why wouldn't it be your boy Derek Carr and the Saints?
Why wouldn't it be? I think because the relationship right now between him and the players and probably the organization is, I'm not a Saints fan. I haven't read too much on it to say it's an all-time low, because there's been other tougher years there, maybe in New Orleans, but things certainly don't look right there. Chris Olave, I did see Chris Olave's press conference after the game, in which he was being very restrained in what he thought around the offensive performance again. I mean, they're 0 for 5 in the red zone. They're 5 for 6 in field goals. Derek Carr throws a pick 6 in the red zone, which essentially is like a 14-point swing, because it looks like they're about to go in. And it's noticeable, and despite the fact that we're going to give Desmond Ridder a difficult time, and maybe rightly so, because he's inconsistencies. And again, this is back to, I suppose, similar to the Mac Jones and Tommy DeVito scenario yesterday. Desmond Ridder had a tough game yesterday, and he threw an interception, but the team never got away from wanting to make plays for him. You've got the Bijan Robinson touchdown. They're rallying around him. When this touchdown goes in, you see a lot of players going up and celebrate him. And that strikes me as a team that recognizes he's a young quarterback and they want to play for him. They want him to perform. You don't get the sense that's the case in New Orleans. Like, Dennis Allen looks like he's on his way out. I imagine the owner, who we've fortunately had an opportunity to interview myself and Colin, he must be looking at going, I'm paying this guy $40 million. This is the guy that was ran out of Vegas. I'm now starting to realize why maybe he's not the leader, in which I think he's got the attributes to be a very good quarterback. But now you get the sense of, we saw how it played out in Vegas, and now we're seeing very quickly in New Orleans that the players aren't playing for him. So that usually only ends one way, in which he doesn't tend to find himself being there for too long. And maybe Jameis Winston is the answer, because the one thing you say about him, he's excitable, and players do seem to want to play for him.
And I do think, and I know we can also come to narrative fallacy, but you keep thinking of that clip of Carr throwing that ball way out of bounds and then giving out to Chris Olave for not catching it.
On the Thursday night game.
Things have gone there.
Yeah, Thursday night game.
Colin, going very much the other direction in Jacksonville at the moment, realized over the weekend, Jacksonville now the only remaining team with a perfect road record this season. They're 5-0 after winning in Houston over the weekend. We talked about Josh Allen for the Bills and what a day he'd had. I mean, it was set up for the Josh Allens of the league quite well by Jacksonville's Josh Allen, who had a hell of a game himself with a couple of sacks and constantly seemed to be in CJ Stroud's face. Unlike last season, and we talked about that heroic Jacksonville playoff comeback victory from 20-odd points down, but mentioning the caveat that you got to put yourself in a 20-point plus hole in the first place, which doesn't reflect particularly well on your defense. This year, Jacksonville's almost a defense-led team, back to the Saxonville, Pixonville of old.
Yeah, but now with a QB who, is incredibly capable. I don't think helped probably by ETN's injury. It didn't look like he was right even when he was back in. There were plays that you felt, he probably could have taken it all the way if he'd been fully healthy. But I mean, this is the Jags sitting at 8-3. They're head and shoulders above everyone now in the division, and they are looking at the number one seed. I mean, the piece was, they obviously have a very talented QB. They have put some weapons around him. To make a deep playoff push. Do they have enough? But they needed their defense to take a real step up. And the question was, could they get enough pressure? Because it is, I mean, they always had the Saxonville name, but they weren't doing that in recent years. And Trayvon Walker, was the pick. He kind of picked off the Daniil Hunter type, physical stats rather than what he had done. But Josh Allen in a contract year, my goodness, it's amazing what a contract can do for you. He is playing lights out. He's playing, with his hair on fire. Now, the Jags, I suppose, they host the Bengals, then they have to go to Cleveland, then they host the Ravens, and then they finish with the Bucks, the Panthers, and the Titans. So, a couple of tough games in there, but like outside of the Ravens game, you imagine they'll be the favorites to win all of those. And if that is the case, 13 wins, they'll certainly be knocking on the door of the number one seed. And if all roads have to go through Jacksonville, people won't enjoy going down there to have to do it. So yeah, kudos to Doug Pederson in turning a really, really bad situation, and a guy who, again, we talked about this on the show previously, is not afraid of facing, I suppose, some of the questions. We see some head coaches get very prickly, when confronted with stats that maybe aren't all that flattering. Doug tends to be very composed at the podium, take it and look to kind of use a Roger Federer-like backhand to deflect it. But then all of a sudden, those concepts and they start to address, it brings in the concepts or looks to address some of the issues in weeks following.
You just reminded me, I loved that comment from Trevor Lawrence in his post-game interview where he was asked about, is it exciting to have CJ Stroud in the division now and to have good rivalries and good QBs? He's like, no, I wish all the teams in our division were terrible and I don't want any good quarterbacks. While also paying tribute then to CJ Stroud and saying it is exciting, but I'd rather he wasn't any good. But kudos to Trevor Lawrence for injecting a bit of humor into that one. Brian, the Jags are going to get that number one seed in the AFC. They will hope they don't have to deal with any bad refereeing calls along the way. We saw some doozies over the weekend. You referred to it earlier, and it's worth coming back to some of those, particularly in that Bills-Eagles game. You saw what looked one of the more open and shut horse collar tackles you're going to see on Josh Allen in that game, which ultimately ends up denying the Bills, stalling a drive and probably denying them 7 points, which were critical at the end of the game. Later on that game, then you had the softest roughing the passer call you're ever going to see, which is a bit of a makeup, I guess. Tiny little bit of contact on Josh Allen after the play. He goes down like a ton of bricks and they get a drive extending penalty on that one. But it's happening again and again where you're seeing, non-calls, bad calls. The refereeing this season, it's terrible that it is a talking point, but it is.
Yeah, and the last game, which you just discussed there, the Jags game, and that game was littered with flags throughout the course of the game. The Jags got 4 first downs resulting off flags. On the Texans defense, there was
a phantom illegal shift call on the Texans as well, which cost them.
Bizarre one. And there was the big throw, which was returned, such as negate such a big explosive play by Stroud, and then that one in particular, the first one. What frustrated me about the one around the horse collar was the enormity of what went on because of that, because then it was deemed to be an incomplete pass, and then it was it took so long for them to make the decision how they were going to progress that play and moving on to the next stage of the game, and they got to get it for so long. And we've seen towards in the playoffs last year where people were ringing down essentially to pick up flags, and there was even one yesterday where they said the league have called in quickly and said no, the flag needs to be picked up and stuff. So there's an inconsistency there. They took the Bones 2 minutes to figure out what they're going to do there. Surely somewhere along the lines someone was going to say, have you not seen Josh Allen's jersey? And what was more frustrating was when you see the back camera angle, the referee is literally looking at the situation and he misses it. It's just bizarre, but it doesn't. We're pinpointing a number of ones, and it's probably more, I suppose, more scrutiny on that one because of the enormity who were playing in the game and the importance of the game yesterday. But across the league yesterday, there was really bad ones in numerous games, and it's never going to go away, unfortunately. It's the reality. Every season we ask the question: when is the refereeing going to improve? And I think the playoffs, it gets worse in the playoffs because what you find in the playoffs is it's not the same refereeing team because every game has their 15, 16 men. What they believe to be is they pick the best guys from each various different team and put them together, and then there's no consistency because when you're going to watch a game, some referees are very particular about certain ways of refereeing in terms of holds and flags, and they let things go. But in the playoffs, it's a mismatch. I always think back to that one a few years ago with the Phantom referee blowing the whistle on the Bengals touchdown against the Raiders, and we couldn't get that right. Anyway,
and by the letter of the law, as you say, that shouldn't have happened. Fred's asked a question here, which is not a stupid question, as he outlines it, saying, do NFL teams scout refs each week? As far as I know, they do, and they put a lot of work into making sure they know what the tendencies are, what to watch out for. The refs obviously spend a lot of time talking to the players and the coaches as well, telling them what they expect, kind of similar to what you see in rugby, but given it the NFL, it's taken to the nth degree. You know, I'm sure there's tape and there's files as long as your arm, and some poor intern gets to pore over what the zebras are doing and not doing every week before it's handed up the line. But far from a stupid question, Fred. And as far as I know, it's a very detailed endeavor for all of the teams, or certainly all of the successful ones. Brian, you were talking about a back angle throw, the Josh Allen horse collar or non-horse collar, as it was in the end. You know, ones that end on a high load. I'm just thinking of one angle I saw of one of you saw the Patrick Mahomes throw to Kelsey.
Yeah.
The one that just I don't think I've ever seen a ball whistle as close to a defensive back's helmet and land. Like, it's just the most beautiful it's one of those casual Mahomes throws. It's only when you actually see the angle from the right side that you appreciate just how pinpoint this thing is. Past the D-back's ear, straight into Kelsey's hands. He doesn't even have to move for it, and he's off to the race. It's just beautiful, beautiful play, and what we're hoping to see every week, unencumbered by poor refereeing decisions if we can.
Yeah, just on the refereeing side of things, Connor, I suppose one of the things, like, mistakes are going to happen, and I don't think you can always blame referees for mistakes. And I do think I don't know how much, like, there's always a call for extra technology, and I see that there's talk today of FIFA using technology on yet more, and I don't think that always helps, but I do think, potentially more personnel, because the game just moves so fast at times, and at other times they do miss it, but I just think we have to accept a level of mistakes, but it's up to the media as well. And I think other things that can happen is sometimes what happens is you get commentators or former players who are used to the league being reffed in a certain way, and then when things change, that can have an impact. Like, one of the things I think yesterday, the hit on DTR is I think that's subjective. Like, I think a lot of people would say there was nothing wrong with it. I know 99% of Broncos fans would tell you that, but I think a lot of people around the league didn't see an issue with it. I think another group of people saw a huge issue with it, and I think it's subjective. The new launching rule is a piece of it, but I think, to me, kind of what stood out just is how long, and this wasn't just in the Broncos game, how long it took a flag to come in. Guys are off the field when a flag comes in. I think that is one of the big issues that the league has to sort out. Is it's crazy how long it's taking for flags to come in.
To be fair, and a good point, read media coverage, and you particularly think back to the Super Bowl and so that holding call and the big hoo-ha over, and it was holding, and it was a perfectly good call. I know you can call holding on every play, but that potentially was a score that would not have happened if the hold hadn't been called. And we rarely call out good refereeing. I saw really good non-whistle on was it or wasn't it a fumble there last week. I can't remember which game it was, which was returned for a touchdown. It turned out that the quarterback's hand did come up empty. Sorry, it was the Lions Packers. Like, that's one where we'd be jumping all over the referees if they'd blown it dead, which they didn't do, which they waited for, and it's correctly then ends up being a turnover and a scoop and score where it otherwise wouldn't have been. So credit where credit's due when it is due. Brian,
just a couple of things on the refereeing. First of all, that Super Bowl play, we're backtracking tonight. I didn't think Greg Olsen helped the situation, because he said in the commentary in that particular evening, he said, in the nature of where we are in the Super Bowl, you got to let that go. Well, and then a couple of weeks ago, there was a very similar situation. He said, "Oh, that's a hole." So you can't have it both ways. It doesn't matter when we are, whether it's the first quarter or it's the second quarter. If it's a flag, is he out of pocket? Has he got the ball back to the line of scrimmage? There's a number of different factors as to that one. That one I can accept. But I agree with Colin on that particular play last night. Again, it's like the guy ends up going off the field with a concussion. So, like, it's so subjective, and I can see why Broncos fans are disappointed. I can see why Browns fans are looking for the call outs. But again, it's the nature of how long it takes. But You haven't really. There's a bigger thing we need to discuss, and you haven't addressed it yet. I don't know whether Connor, you have it there on the list before we close out the show, or should I just? Will I bring it up now? Will I
Throw it out there. Put the fish on the table, Brian.
It doesn't seem to come up, and I'm surprised. I thought we could have lead the show off with it, but I'll throw it out there.
Cleveland game. But before we do, we gotta show you halftime entertainment. Oh, sheep rodeo. You can't go wrong.
So that for me.
You're quite right, Brian. A massive oversight. We talked about the Broncos and everything. We didn't talk about the most important thing that happened in that game. I don't know what the equivalent of Tusla is in the US, but why they weren't called over that little spectacle, I will never know. Never mind the Society for the Protection.
Was that not a clear holding call on the child? No.
That was a sheep collar rather than a horse collar. Yeah.
All I was going to explain to us the rationale behind that.
It's a tradition to call him.
There was definitely a rough in the passer. Well, like in Colorado, these types of things. I mean, if you look at the one aspect of college football that I do enjoy is the fact that they run a real life actual buffalo at the games. Not sure that you get away with that at an NFL game, so they decided to go with that. Whatever that was as well. I like the fact that they appeared to just drop. I don't know if the kids knew that they were going to be participating or if they were just hauled from the stands and just dropped onto the sheet, because it looked like they didn't have a clue what was going on.
Some of them took some fairly nasty looking spills as well. I mean, we saw the clip there. That was the kid who I think won it, who at least managed to stay on, clinging for dear life on the wall all the way into the end zone. But a couple of the other ones went down hard. I don't know. Hopefully they clear the concussion protocol and they're available for the next sheep run in a couple of weeks' time. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, on that high note, as they very much are riding in Broncos country by the looks of it, we'll be back on Wednesday in our change-up schedule during December, and we will talk to you then.